Thanks for watching Afternoon Live. Our next guest has been helping people communicate with their departed loved ones for decades. And little did we know he was also using his gift to help the FBI solve crimes. Now he's sharing it all in the new book, Chasing Evil: Shocking Crimes, Supernatural Forces, and an FBI agent's search for hope and justice. We welcome psychic medium John Edward. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How in the world did you keep this a secret for so long, especially having a public persona? I'm sure a lot of our viewers recognize your work on television.
So my dad was a New York City police officer, a career military guy, and maybe not a big fan of the subject matter. And one of the things he said to me early on in my career was, please do not besmirch my name and don't ever let me find out that you're working with the police. So I respected that, to be really honest. I have a great deal of respect for law enforcement. And when Robert Hilland actually reached out to my office, he reached out to me with a real case, but he also was reaching out because he did not believe in the subject matter and he wanted to expose this as not being legitimate. He had heard me on the radio and didn't like the fact that they were putting me on frequently. And he had heard me each time I was on. So he legitimately came to me with a case, but under the guise of, I'm going to have him arrested, basically.
It's such a great beginning of this story that Robert reaches out to you like, come on, man, I got to debunk all this stuff. And you were able to convince him pretty quickly because he laid out some evidence in front of you and you were able to decipher what was what.
Yeah, so he brought a real cold case to me and he brought evidence from that specific case. But he also went around to people in his office and took items that were independent of the case and put it all in the same bag. Laid it out in front of me, and I was able to discern what doesn't belong to the case. So that kind of got his attention. Then he said, well, I've listened to you on the radio. You connect people with those who have crossed over with the listeners. And I went, I do. He goes, well, can I get the victim's daughter on the phone and you do your thing? And then he thought, like, 1, 2, 3, the case is going to be over if this is real. I didn't feel anything about the woman on the phone, but I wound up reading for him. So now information about his family came through, some of which he did not have knowledge about, and he had to go home and ask his parents. So when he went home and gave the information to his parents, now he had personal validation that there's no way I would know what I knew because it had to do with, a different country. So all of these things were kind of like the perfect storm for him to go like, hold on, like I need to like reframe this. And this is a hard data, evidence-based brain that you're dealing with. And then it became just inquisitive. And he asked me if would I try to help him? And I normally would say no, but I said yes. And it started this 3-decade connection where I say openly, I didn't solve anything. He did his job. All I did was provide information and insights in the way that I do with my regular clients, whether it's in a one-on-one or in a group, and what they do with that can either help them on their journey of grief or not. He just utilized it. And it became a really cool experience for me. And then there was a whole other personal thing that I didn't realize I was working through some of my dad's issues, and with this guy with law enforcement. So the universe was teaching me a lesson personally while I was helping him.
Full circle. Well, and I love the way you describe your perspective of it. I didn't solve the case, but Robert describes you as kind of his personal GPS, where he could point you in certain directions that maybe hadn't been followed before, and they would find the next thing that they needed to maybe make a big break in a case.
He did. And I found that really fascinating because if I was working with a client and the client said, is XYZ going to happen? And if I got information about that, if the client tried to ask me the same question, I wouldn't get information about it because it's like, is 2 + 2 4? Yes, 2 + 2 is 4. And then if they ask me again, is 2 + 2 4? I'd be like, yes, 2 + 2 is 4. But when Bob did it, I got different perspectives. And it was a whole wait, what is happening here? Because it was new for me. I was not ready for that. So kind of took me on a journey of like, all right, what is happening here? Like, how is this working? Like, this is not the norm for me. So why is this happening with him?
Yeah, a lot of the book focuses on this really complicated investigation of John Smith, and it's still kind of tangled. There are still some loose ends, but it does sound like in the process, you were able to give some answers to some family members that had been really seeking for a long time.
I actually never really dealt with the family members of the person that's missing. Bob did all of that. I legitimately always say it's like, I didn't really work for the FBI. I worked for a different 3-letter organization called the BOB. That's what I call them the BOB. And I know he would have the interactions with, the people, because I really did ask him in the beginning, because I had, at the time I had a young son. I was on television. I didn't want it didn't want the worlds to come together. So I said to him, I go, I'll try to help you. Just don't put my name anywhere. And he said, no worries. I want to keep my job. So
Yeah.
we're good. And we did. We kept it really quiet. And what was really interesting for me is I had some of the crossing over TV producers that I worked with when they read the book. They were like, dude, this was going on while you were filming the show. And I went, yeah. And they were like, you came under such attack during that period of time. Why didn't you just say you were doing that? And I said, no, that was my deal. Like, I wanted to keep it private.
Well, I wanted to ask you about what the experience must have been like because you did work on some high profile cases where I imagine you would be sitting maybe watching news coverage of something that you were investigating behind the scenes, just going, yeah, I know what's going on here, but I can't say anything. And that was the agreement that you made.
Yeah, the only time that that happened, there was a case called the Annie Lee case, and it was a girl that was missing at Yale University. And I was on tour in Ireland, and Bob and I talked 2 days in a row about that case. And the gentleman that was driving me, if he had paid attention in any shape, way, or form of the conversation happening in the backseat of his car, it was what was airing on CNN International,
Wow.
the news there. So it was kind of weird. Not that I talked to anybody about it, but it was like I was having this conversation and then it was appearing on the news in Ireland at that same time. So that was that was a little surreal.
Totally. Tell us about your show that you are bringing to Portland.
So the TV show Crossing Over was based on my live events, which I've been doing now for over 35 years, where every city, state, and country I go to, it's the same. I basically do Crossing Over live. So it's like I'm going to be doing a Q&A. I talk a little bit about energy. I explain the process. I answer people's questions. And then I do as many readings as I possibly can that the time allows.
Well, we so appreciate your time sharing with us today. People are loving the book, and we're excited to see you here in town very soon. Thank you
Thank
again.
you.